Like Allison, I forget things too, so I'm going to read from my notes to make sure I don't miss anything. Thank you so much for being here. That first session got me all inspired, so I'm hopeful that we'll keep that momentum and energy up. My name is Anthony Harrison, and I'm the moderator for this panel around diversity, equity, inclusion, and how we can build a more diverse workforce in the media. I am also a proud COM alum, and I'm currently the president of the BU Alumni Association. And as someone asked me last night, that means I'm the president of all alumni, not just Black alumni. My career has been in corporate communications at various companies, including Verizon, the New York Times, Disney, Starbucks, Microsoft, and Facebook, where I helped launch the company's first DEI report and website. Oriel Davis-Lyons used to be a chef, but after getting tired of the long hours and intense pressure, he decided to get into advertising. A lower pressure job? He started his ad career in New Zealand before moving to the US in 2015, where he worked in New York at some of the world's top agencies, including Droga5 and RGA, before joining Spotify, where he is currently the head of creative for podcast and talk. He has won over 100 awards for his work on multinational brands, nonprofits, and failed presidential campaigns. He is also the founder of One School, the first free online portfolio program for aspiring Black creatives, and Corp Leisure, a work-from-home wear brand for the new normal. He lives in upstate New York with his family. Next to him is Kathy Johnson, who is also a proud Terrier and principal at the Lawrence Advisory, a Los Angeles-based human capital consulting firm where she leads executive search and other client projects, including the management of a career activation program for diverse college seniors who are preparing to enter the media industry. She previously led sales and marketing teams at Black Entertainment Television, Disney Channel, and Times Mirror Cable Television. Kathy is also the former president of the National Association for Multi-Ethnicity in Communications, the premier professional association focused on multi-ethnic diversity in the cable television industry, and is the former COO of Digital Diversity Network, a nonprofit focused on diversity in digital media and technology. She earned her BS degree in broadcast and journalism and her MBA in marketing from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And last, but certainly not least, Fanshen Cox is the co-author of The Inclusion Writer, used by Hollywood studios and production companies, the fashion industry, and the Grammys to adopt an inclusive hiring process. She is a former development and impact executive at Matt Damon and Ben Affleck's Pearl Street Films, and the co-host of Sister Brunch, a podcast highlighting Black women and gender-expansive people thriving in entertainment and media. She's also local from Cambridge, so just across the bridge. Thank you all for being here. I'm super excited to have this conversation. Oriel, I'm going to start with you. First question, what are some of the systemic changes we need to see to address the lack of diversity in the media industry?
Cool, thank you. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I think I've been thinking about this question a little bit. And I think over the last couple of years, there's been a desire to appeal to the goodness of corporate hearts in order to make some of these changes, right? And we're kind of trying to appeal to these large companies to do the right thing. And I think the shift that I would love to see and that I'm trying to make myself is to make the business case, for greater diversity. And one of those ways, and I think some of the very practical ways that we can start to make that shift, is to apply, I think, all the traditional kind of mechanics of, corporate growth and career growth and all the things that we know motivate anyone in the kind of corporate structure. But how do we bring diversity into that? And by that, I mean, executive bonuses that reward kind of sales numbers, right? What if you also include retention of your Black and brown employees as a KPI. Like, you don't get a bonus if half of your diverse staff, leaves within 2 years, right? Or promotions. Like, it's not enough to just be good at your job, right? It's also being good at your job means mentoring someone, mentoring, a diverse or Black or brown employee, and being responsible for that person's career growth. You don't get a promotion if you're not actively mentoring someone. And I think what I would love to see more of is some of those traditional frameworks that we do use to incentivize people, and then apply those, to the growth of Black people inside of these corporations. Because I think we can only get so far, like, by explaining and appealing to companies to do the right thing. And I think we have to start making it we have to start tying the growth of our own community to a much more kind of watertight business case. And, I think that would be the start. It's not by any means, the be all and end all, but I think it would be a start.
No, absolutely. Kathy?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to add too, I think that pay scales need to be addressed, because that's a huge barrier to entry. A lot of times for diverse people, a lot of times you have to come from a very privileged background to be able to even take an entry-level job in the media industry in a creative field. So I think that that's something that needs to be addressed, is to make it so that people make a living wage. You don't have the luxury of having your parents support. Not everyone has the luxury of having your parents support you, being able to move to a larger city to accept a job because you don't have a place to live. You're not making enough money to sustain yourself. So I think that that's something that needs to be addressed structurally as well, or pay scales. And then also the issue of having leadership at the top that can make those decisions around hiring and recruiting and bringing in more people of color.
That leadership brings up a good question, Fanshen. I'd like to ask you this. How can we help, and in some cases force, industry leaders to do the work necessary to make lasting change? So not to rely on the kindness of strangers who feel guilty to do what's right, but how do we put their feet to the fire?
We're trying. One of the lessons we learned with the inclusion writer, and I'll just explain it very quickly just to give a sense, the idea was to have an A-lister or A-listers take this hiring process into their contract negotiations with production companies and studios. And it essentially says that the production company or studio agrees to, first of all, diversify the hiring pool. This is modeled after the Rooney Rule, which now we've seen some of the ways that we need to keep pushing further on the Rooney Rule. The second piece is that they actually set targets and benchmarks. We have this incredible civil rights attorney named Kalpana Kodagal who wrote the legal language so that we could be tight on this and not be accused of reverse racism or quotas, but that you can actually set targets and benchmarks for hiring so that you actually do that and you're transparent about it. That during your hiring process, you are collecting the data. And again, you're making that data transparent. And then at the end, and this is where we're really holding Hollywood's feet to the fire, at the end, you then look at your targets and benchmarks, you look at the data you've collected, and where you fell short, you make a meaningful contribution into the communities, into the organizations that serve, to actually mentor and train the talent that you said that you couldn't find. And this way, we're always coming full circle. When I thought about the title of our panel, Cultivating Talent, my first response is always, there's so much talent out there. So when I first got to Pearl Street, I was like, oh, we're gonna do trainings. And so many of my colleagues in Hollywood were already doing that. So the last thing I wanted to do is to bring another training program. Instead, we started to think about, why aren't these people getting hired? And so we developed this process to say, no, the folks are there. We actually have to make sure they get hired. And can thrive there.
For sure, for sure. Kathy, mentorship, how important is that, and what can we do other than being mentored ourselves? Like what can we do to sort of increase mentorship? Because I know for myself, that was so critical at so many points in my career, was to have someone that could give me a gut check around what was really going on in the room that maybe I was missing because I hadn't been exposed to it before. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
Well, I think it's important on two fronts, not just for the mentee, but also for the mentor. And to your point, when it comes to being mentored by someone, not everyone has the benefit of growing up in a household where maybe you come from a corporate background. Your parents are sitting around the evenings talking, about corporate politics and how to navigate that. So it's also very helpful as a student to have a mentor in that regard, or a young career professional, or actually at any age, to have a mentor throughout your entire career. I work with a program called the Emma Bowen Foundation that prepares diverse college students for careers in the media. They give them multi-year paid summer internships, and I'll put information about this on the resource document. And I actually manage a mentor program for their 70 college seniors as they're making the transition from college to career. But these are students who have had multi-year internships throughout through college. And I always tell them also that mentoring is the beginning of learning how to network professionally. So it's always important how you show up, because a lot of times your career success is about who you know, not so much about what you know. So it's really important to really start to build that professional network. Your mentor can also make introductions for you. The other thing I found more recently too is that mentors have helped some of these students with their mental health. It's very stressful when you're about to graduate from college and you don't have a job, you're nervous. Some of them are children of immigrants that their families depend upon them to help support the family. I'm the first college graduate in my family, and I don't have a job yet, and they're really, really depressed about that. So I found that some of the mentors have helped them navigate some of those mental health issues and that anxiety as well. But I also tell them that you shouldn't feel like you are a pest or a nuisance because you want someone to mentor them. Mentoring also benefits the mentor. I found that some of those, particularly with cross-cultural mentoring, have learned to be better managers to people of color. They've gained a better understanding of what people of color experience in their careers, and they've learned to be a better manager to their own employees of color. And also, I think from an ego standpoint, it makes people feel good about, being able to impart their wisdom to others as well. So I think it works both ways. It's not just a one-way street.
Yeah. I also think in my own experience of it's another way to sort of mentor without or to broaden your impact, I think, is to be out and visible, right? To be at events, to be present, to be so that younger people or different people just see you as who you are and what you're doing, and if you can see it, you can be it, kind of thing. And so that's something that I've tried to do myself in terms of just being who I am and being sort of clear and transparent and authentic and having fun with it and not taking myself too seriously, because I think that creates a comfortable environment where people will either approach you or reach out to you in some way and kind of try to learn a little bit of something from you just by the way you sort of have navigated and moved through the space that you share with them, I think is also really, really important. In terms of pipeline, we hear about pipeline. Fanshen, you talked about how there's not a pipeline issue. There's lots of talent out there. But Oriel in particular, given what you've done with your school, I'd love to hear, your thoughts about how to build or make the pipeline more visible, maybe, rather than just build it.
Sure. Yeah, I guess I can kind of go back to maybe how I started the one school, and I think it really started by identifying what the issue was with our current pipeline. And I came up in creative advertising, and one of the best and worst things about that is that you kind of don't need any qualifications. You need a book full of ideas and a portfolio. And that's how I got in, because traditional education and me just didn't really mix. So I kind of believed in the strength of that model, right? That all you need is a book of ideas. And then when I got to the States, I realized that the way that you put that book together came with a lot of privilege, in that a portfolio school was usually 2 years full time, and it was $40,000, and that was on top of any other, higher education that you'd already done. So when we were looking at books, when I was looking at books as a creative director, thinking I'm just going to pick the best ideas, or that was what you would hear is I just see the ideas, I don't see the person. What we're really seeing is actually only the tip of the iceberg, and we're only seeing the people who had the privilege to be able to kind of put $40,000 into a portfolio. So I think for me, identifying that as a kind of a cause or an issue, I could then focus the pipeline there, and I was like, okay, let me remove some of those barriers. So the school that I started is all online. It's free, and it's not 2 years, it's 16 weeks. So basically we focus on getting the students what they need, which is a book. We get that together and we get them into the industry, and we say to the industry, right, the talent is here, and your job is to pick it up and continue that education, because once you're in, I think you can learn. I mean, I've learned everything I kind of know on the job. And so I think in terms of building these pipelines, I think it often requires just looking at what's wrong with the existing pipeline, and where are those blockages? Why aren't Black and brown communities finding a way either into that pipeline, or why aren't they coming out with the same opportunities as other students? And in our industry, in my industry, it was that kind of inherent privilege that came with being able to put together a portfolio, which you wouldn't see on the other side, because ultimately you're just looking at ideas on a piece of paper, and you can't see the privilege that goes into that. So I think that would be for me how to start and where to kind of begin, is like, what are those blockages that prevent young people of color from surfacing into your industry, and then also how can you begin to solve that with also, I don't want to say the least effort, but the lowest lift, because basically we started, and I think this was the silver lining of 2020, we started with a Zoom call. It was myself and it was 15 aspiring Black creatives, and it was me kind of giving them everything I knew about how to put together a great portfolio, and that was it. And that's kind of still the core of the school, although it's grown and we have more students and we have more people involved in the administration. But I do thoroughly believe that getting something started with the lowest lift and just getting going is much better than spending 2 years in planning and losing, there's just too many opportunities to lose momentum. So
yeah, I love the idea of looking at the existing pipeline and figuring out where it's broken or where it's blocked, and where it's not working for our community. Fanshen, in entertainment, and when you came into it, what have you seen change in relation to the pipeline?
Yeah, I think in the best of ways, what's happening now and what happened after the George Floyd murder, again, everybody started coming back to us, right? All the DEI folks in the industry, that thing you were talking about. And something great that happened during that period is that a lot of executives got hired, and that wasn't happening before. There's a wonderful organization called Color Entertainment, nonprofit that serves to uplift and nurture executives, because those are the folks in the rooms making the decisions. Those are the people greenlighting the projects. So that's been very exciting to see that piece of the pipeline is starting to change, so that now that pendulum has swung back, they're now in those positions of power, which is wonderful. Another really important piece that is not considered enough, and we made sure was written into the inclusion rider, is crew. So, there's always the visibility of actors, and that's changing a lot. Cast is There are big changes, still much more to be done. But in crew positions, the pipeline is small because it's small for everybody. Folks don't know what a gaffer is unless you've been on a set. Folks don't know about lighting. And then if you are a gaffer and you're not used to lighting darker skin, you don't know how to do that. So now there are really big pushes. There's Ava DuVernay created Array Crew, a place where you can find crew members. There's Cruvy, there's Women of Color Unite. There are now a lot of organizations that serve to make sure that those who are crew members are visible. And then there's also organizations like the Handy Foundation, which is for assistant editors, to learn how, to get ready and have the craft. That is an area where we aren't part of that pipeline because we don't have the training. We don't even know what those roles are. So we're really working to make sure that's what we do on Sister Brunch, on the podcast too, is make sure we have women that represent all the different kinds of roles that you can have in entertainment.
I think it's also critical to address the people in the middle, because if you can't keep the people that are there, you're always going to be looking for that new bunch of people to come through the pipeline. And I think a lot of times people of color in particular feel like, I'm hired, I'm the best thing since sliced bread when I come in the door, but once I get here, the brakes are slammed and I'm not going anywhere. So I think it's really important that people see an opportunity to grow within an organization. Otherwise, you're just going to have this constant churn of talent unless you are retaining those who are there.
So how does that happen? Is it influencing at the top, or
there's a couple
kicking
different
from the
ways
side?
to attack that. When I was the president of NAMIC, which is National Association for Multi-Ethnicity and Communications, it's a mouthful, we actually launched 20 years ago an executive leadership program that was developed from the perspective of people of color and their experiences in corporate America. So we had an academic partnership with UCLA's Anderson School of Business. We asked media companies, or cable companies in particular, to nominate high potential executives of color at the director level and above, or VP level and above, that they saw having the capacity to move into the C-suite. And they were nominated it was a very competitive program to get into. They were nominated for one of 25 seats in the program. And we had a network of coaches or professors and consultants of color who led these conversations. And it was really about their experiences, what they were experiencing within their companies, and how to navigate that. So I think some people thought it is their group therapy when they got there. It was 12 sessions that was broken up into 4 3-day sessions out at the Anderson School at UCLA. Some people saw it as group therapy. It was a mini MBA program as well. We also tried to encourage some of the managers of those people to come to a session. We actually advocated for funding for a session for the managers of those people also to come out to UCLA. Let's talk about the culture that they're going back into as well. Of course, the funding was denied, but it's interesting that you bring up, since the murder of George Floyd, now all of these executives want to have these conversations. They want to be involved. How do I improve my company culture? So I think it's a combination of giving people of color the resources that they need to navigate the system, but also it's like, what are companies doing to make sure that people are being seen, feeling heard? We heard after the murder of George Floyd that, my employees feel much more empowered to speak up and speak out. So they're bringing in, group mentoring, creating programs for some of those people who are in the middle to make sure that they're, that they feel like they're being seen, they're being heard within the organization.
And we should mention the DEIAB, the B is belonging, right? And when I first heard that term, I was like, is this something white people are saying because they feel like they don't belong anymore? And it's not. It is about, and it's part of why a critique of the inclusion writers, like, we can help get you in the door, but what happens when you get there? And so I really think that this initiative around belonging and when we're there, do we actually feel safe in those spaces? Do we feel that we have agency? Do we feel like our voices are being heard and that we are leading? So I think that's a piece that, acronyms are, we can keep going with the acronym, but the important thing is those concepts are are happening.
My last company partnered with the Haas Business School at UC Berkeley and did a book on belonging, and it's a workbook, and so it's got some really good tools and activities that managers, employees, it's sort of a guide to how to create a belonging, a corporate culture where all people feel welcome to voice themselves. And so that's something I'll place in the resource document as also. Kathy, what advice, several people here and we're at a university, what advice would you give students of color that are trying to break into the media field?
First of all, I would do no fewer than 2 internships while you're in college. A lot of recruiters won't even take you seriously if you haven't done at least 2. I do a lot of work with students on their resumes and things like that. Some of these students already have done like 8 internships. I'm exhausted just looking at their resumes. It's like, my goodness, how are you doing all of that? So that's one thing I would impart. And also I would maintain to anyone who's a young professional, and it's one of the principles that we learned in the executive leadership program that we did through NAMIC is Dr. Price Cobbs, who is a renowned psychiatrist who actually had been doing diversity and inclusion work in the 60s. He was one of our professors, and he brought up the notion of having a healthy sense of entitlement to power. Oftentimes, people of color don't think they're entitled to be in positions of power. And it's really having that healthy sense of entitlement, knowing that you belong in a room. I oftentimes talk to students on Zoom. They see my white hair. They call me Miss Kathy. I really discourage them from doing that. Please call me Kathy, because when you get into the office, you're going to call your colleagues by their first names. So you don't want to come across as being subordinate in any way, or your white male counterparts calling anyone in the office Mr. Mr. So-and-so. So I think it's really just making sure that you belong, you have a seat, you should have a seat at the table and really know that you're entitled to be there because you've worked hard and you deserve to be there and have that seat at the table.
So in little things like that, it's so interesting that we just weren't raised to understand or connect the dots around those things.
Right, they're trying to be respectful,
Yeah.
I get it,
Yeah.
but that's not how it works.
Well, I was going to ask if around internships, are they now in media and communications? In Hollywood, there was rightfully so a strong pushback around folks working for free, interns working for free. So we are at the point where that's not happening anymore. They're at least getting minimum wage, which is not going to cover your life. But I'm curious, in the media industry and communications, is that the case as well now?
It depends upon the organization. I know some of the Emma Bowen fellows are typically making now in the $27 an hour, somewhere thereabouts. Some are lower. There's one major media organization, I think, that was still trying to do minimum wage, but I think they've gotten them up a little bit, but it's not a lot. But I think for the most part nowadays you have to pay interns. There's also another program called the T. Howard Foundation that also places students of color in media industry internships. The distinction with Emma Bowen, they're multi-year internships with the same company. And then with the T. Howard Foundation, it's a 1-year internship, but you can go back again the following year and apply again. And all of these are focused on media, entertainment, and technology. And again, I'll list T. Howard in the resource document as well.
Could I add, I guess, just for when I think about students now and something I tell my students, I think the barriers for entry are probably still as high as they ever were. But I think the barriers for creation have never been lower. And what I mean by that is it is far easier to go out and create whatever it is, content, art, anything really that comes to mind with the resources that are kind of readily available and often free or very kind of, low cost. And that is, I think, something that I try and encourage my students to do. It's like, don't wait for someone to come along and give you a brief, right? Don't wait for someone to hand you opportunities. I think now, it is possible to create a presence for yourself without necessarily having a huge platform, right? And I think oftentimes the students that come through our school and go on to be really successful, they're already doing that. You know, they're already on YouTube, they're on TikTok, they are comfortable on these platforms, presenting themselves. And I think, you know, to your point, Kathy, like with a sense of like, I'm supposed to be here, I'm going to be good, and I'm going to be creative, and I'm going to find my way with or without you. And I think that attitude is needed. And I think the tools that are available to express that now have probably never been more accessible. So I do encourage students, I'm like, don't wait, right? Like your job is to really stand out and get to the front of that queue when those doors do open. And, you know, you need to look at the kind of media landscape as those are all opportunities to kind of put yourself at the front of that queue.
I just have to add, it's so exciting to see Hollywood executives are extremely singular in their knowledge, white, male, cis, even more so. And it's really wonderful to see people, you know, who carry a studio in their bag, right? And therefore they know how to develop an idea, they know how to film the idea, they edit the idea, and they distribute the idea without this executive who only knows how to say yes or no. And that's very exciting.
I think we also need to address the phenomena of remote work. That opens up a lot of possibilities as well. I think if you're recruiting for talent, you can, you know, it knocks out all the geographic boundaries. You can bring in more diverse people. And again, you know, it makes you a candidate, you know, for more positions as well. You're not just confined by geography anymore.
Yeah, I think it's about being fearless, which I think younger people are way more fearless in their 20s than I was in my 20s. I was trying to fit into a box, and once I realized that wasn't going to work, that's when things really started to get better, and that they have access to resources to do all kinds of things, and they just go for it, right? Just my personal opinion on the internship pay thing, I have always told anyone who ever asked me, don't ever work for free.
Right.
Like,
Right.
period, end of sentence. Don't ever work for free. You are worth more than that. And that's part of that, you know, believing in yourself and your right to be in a place and to do a thing and act in a way. So that is for sure. I'd love to open it up for questions from the audience or ideas, perspective, opinions. So anyone have a question?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Karen Ward. I'm at the WCVB TV station here in Boston. I'd like to share some information and support what you said, Kathy. Hearst Television is the parent company of WCVB, and we work very closely with the Emma Bowen Foundation and T. Howard, and in fact have hired many of the Emma Bowen and T. Howard graduates. But what I wanted to share is that in 2023, we'll be transitioning from course credit for internships to paid internships. So there are 33 Hearst television stations around the country, including here in Boston.
Yes.
We would like all of our students in these various markets to make sure you apply. That's
Love
it.
Thank you. Do we have that information in the?
We'll make sure we get that in the doc also. I see another question back there. Oh, you're holding the microphone. No, I'm just a microphone. Oh. There you go.
Anthony, I'd love to speak on intersectionality just while we're waiting for another question. But we, as we created the Inclusion Writer, we were 3 women, 2 women of color, but cis women. And there were a lot of pieces that we weren't thinking about. And although they were kind of part of the language of the Inclusion Writer, as we went to make it more systemic so that we weren't only going to, you know, to A-list celebrities, but we were going to entire companies or going to the Grammys, to the Recording Academy to adopt it. We made sure that we had the voices of the disability community. We have scholars who look at colorism. I mean, one of the things we get from Black showrunners, for example, when we bring the Inclusion Writer to them is they say, oh, we're already doing it. And I'm like, everybody on your show is light-skinned, right? And all the DEI folks in Hollywood are all light-skinned. So, so the LGBTQ community, all of those folks need to be included when we talk about Blackness, and that tends to be missing. So we have work to do as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for that. My bad for forgetting that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Tiffany Walden, co-founder and editor-in-chief of The Tribe in Chicago.
Yes.
Um, Thank you. This is kind of a specific question about cultivating talent out of high school and out of college into professional journalism career. In Chicago, we're starting to notice that a lot of young Black students who are really interested in journalism are fatigued by the news and they don't want to go into news reporting. And I'm guilty of that too. When I was young, I wanted to go into journalism, but I also didn't want to be a news reporter. But I had mentors that guided me that way in order to really learn and understand journalism. So I'm wondering if you have any advice on how we can start creating that pipeline, because I do fear that maybe 5, 10, 15 years from now, we won't have a lot of young Black journalists who are covering news specifically. And I think social media has a lot to do with it too, because everyone, arts and entertainment is fun, to be honest. And we see that a lot on social media, but we are noticing kind of a drought right now.
I mean, my first thought is the everyday, not the celebrity Black journalists, but the everyday Black journalists that are, out there writing those stories need to be visible and sort of be a role model, whether in person or in some way, to people in high school, right? And so that they, again, if you see something and understand something better than what either the media or social media is telling you, that can spark your interest to sort of continue the passion to go on. So I think that's the first step. I think even though, we certainly have made a tremendous amount of progress, there's still so much more to go. And I think it's on all of us, the people in this room and the people we work with who look like us, to, again, be as visible as possible, and to spread the word as much as we can about ideas and opportunities and taking risk, and how we each in our own individual way got to where we are. And I feel like that work it's not ending anytime soon, right? We need to continue to teach those lessons and share those stories and provide that perspective that will get that next generation interested and excited about some of these kinds of jobs, I think.
I can't speak for journalism specifically, but one way that we try and address that in the school is that every week, to your point, we do have a senior Black creative leader, from the industry come and talk to the class, and it's a chance for them to get that kind of face time and to see that those roles are there and that they're visible and that they're possible. And I don't know if there's like a natural forum for that you have for that. For us, it happens within the school. But we found that has been, I think, a real help in terms of understanding what is possible, the diversity of the roles, because obviously there is everyone wants to be a creative director right now. Like you've got, people 19 years old on Instagram and they're creative directors. I'm like, what are you creative directing? But what they don't know is that there is also production, there is strategy, there is, account management. There are all these roles that kind of circle the creative industry that we're in that may be a better fit. But there is not really an obvious way to find out about those. I didn't know advertising was even an industry until I was in my mid-20s. So we have that forum. Obviously, we've kind of built that with the school. So I don't know if there's, like I said, like a natural place for that to happen, but I've found that's been one of the most impactful, I think, parts of the program, is creating that direct line, like you're saying, between the people doing the jobs and giving them the kind of platform to be able to explain what that job entails day to day, and then what those jobs are that are kind of one step to the side, right? That that young Black aspiring journalists or creatives might not have considered. So maybe that's the first kind of step, is to figure out where that interaction could happen on a more regular basis.
And being here has helped me realize how entertainment has not served that as well. We name one story about a Black journalist, a film or a television series. And Deshauna and I were talking last night about Ida B. Wells, and every time I think that, how has that not been made? And I think somebody's making it. It wouldn't make sense for me to try that, but that is a way that entertainment could at least reflect these are the kinds of stories, and I've certainly been inspired here, and I'm taking pitches for my company, TruJuLo. Honestly, I think that there is a great opportunity there to tell those stories, in film and television, so we can see that on a broader scale.
No, that's actually.
I really am taking pitches too. So.
Question as the mic runner. So it seems like a lot of us in here are COM alums or BU alums. I love that. I'm one too, class of 2021, from the journalism program. But I want to recenter back on academia, because when we talk about, nourishing communicators and getting executives and flourishing networks, that's so at the corporate level. And as a recent grad, I won't, I love COM, Marriott, I love COM. But, as a student and now as a staff member, and one of the few Black staff members, we're hearing some of the same things that were being said by my Black counterparts in class, of being kind of like bogged down by not feeling nurtured in the classroom, not feeling nurtured on campus. And we love the Center for Anti-Racist Research, but I was here when that started, and some may have felt that that was kind of like a way to be performative, a way to say we're working in anti-racism, to show that BU's doing it. We've got BU, D&I, and then we've got COM, diversity, equity, inclusion. And when we don't see enough funding, when we don't see enough of the presence on campus and showing up in who's teaching, and do I have professors who look like me? Are we talking about Black trauma journalism? Are we, having these really important conversations? Or am I the only one in class who can talk about George Floyd and everyone looks at me? And that's mentally challenging. And so I want to know what you all think about this perspective of performative diversity, equity, inclusion, and performing that we support our Black people. And because if we're really talking about fostering the industry and creating Black narrative, Black story, that starts in the classroom, as we've shown, because we were COM students, we were journalism students, media students. But I feel like and I say this all the time as the administrator for film and TV, that we can't just focus on getting more Black faculty. We can't just focus on getting more Black students in the classroom. It has to be done together. It doesn't move like this and then like this. No, it moves like this. And then once we get them, how do we retain them? And then, retainment, that looks like me as a Black student, that looks like, well, I was one. How did you nourish me as a student? And I'm blessed to see my mentors here in this room. So that's why I love COM. But other ways, how are you nourishing me as a journalist? Because I will say I'm bogged down. I stopped freelancing because I didn't want to do the mental strain anymore. So I'm taking a break as the administrator of film and TV. But how do we address that in our students? How do we cultivate this, not even just to get you to the network, to get you to corporate? It's how do we get you to flourish in class and in school and in your work and the stories that you choose to cover, and how your own school supports you, and not in a performative way. What are we actually doing, and what does that actually look like? Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. I won't even begin to try to speak for the school, but I will say on a personal level, I think it's one, having students like you that speak out, that feel comfortable speaking out, that hold the college accountable for what they do and don't do. and raising this issue with faculty and staff and alumni who might have more ability to change things than you think, right? And raising that with all of them, because it's going to take all of them to really sort of move things forward, right? It's not just the dean, it's not just the faculty, it's not just the staff, it's everybody sort of coming together. And I feel like as a COM alum, and now pretty active as an alum with COM and the university in general, that it is not performative, but it, being an academic institution, takes time. And it can be frustrating for me with a corporate background, how slowly things do happen, but there are things that are happening that, from my perspective, feel positive in terms of having the student at the core of these changes, right? And thinking about what's going to provide a better educational experience for each of those students. And how do you bring that all together?
One thing I would also suggest, having come from nonprofit, is the power of associations. Do you have any kind of student networking associations where you can support one another? Also, you can belong to NABJ. I'm sure they have student chapters. NAMIC has student chapters. So I think also just by having that networking opportunity with people who are going through the same experiences, that are people that are like you, I think it gives you some of that support that you need on a personal level. And also, I advocate for association membership in your career, because a lot of times you learn things that you don't know in your job, or sometimes you learn things you don't want your employer to know you don't know. You might learn it by, learning through an association. And also, an association sometimes lets you be a leader when your company won't, or your school won't. So you can be a leader also.
And keep on pushing us.
Yeah.
Make us speak truth to you, and for everybody. And we all continually have to learn and evolve. And without the push, the change doesn't happen.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Hi, I'm Allison Davis. A couple of things, and I hope this doesn't sound too disjointed, but I came to this university in 1971 with a whole lot of Black folks, because it was a reaction to what happened in 1968. And then there was no one. I come back to the university, I don't see a whole lot of Black folks here in comparison to when I was going to school. So that's a little disheartening. So I certainly understand what you're saying. And yes, we have been trying to get a NABJ chapter, if not just on this campus, but probably with other schools as well. So we hopefully can continue to do that. But I wanted to ask a question about stretching our hands back a little further. And it's not just, what we're finding is a lot of wonderful raw talent in high school students. And we can, and all of these organizations can have an incredible effect on those students who are contemplating, do I go to college, do I not go to college? What am I interested in? What am I fascinated with? What do I want to do? Do I want to be a creator? I want to be a rapper, but is there something else that I can do besides being a rapper? I want to be, ophthalmologist, but what else can I do? So the bottom line is, I would like to ask you all, do you have your hand reached out to high school students? Are you thinking about engaging high school students? Because I think that the impact will be enormous.
Oh, I'll take this opportunity for everyone who's here in Boston. This weekend is the Scout Film Festival, which is for young filmmakers. A young woman named Natalie Jasmine Harris, who's a Black queer woman, is going to be there. She's being awarded something, but she'll find out tomorrow. But this is a perfect example. This is for filmmakers 24 and younger. They've got filmmakers who are 8 years old and 16, and so that is one of the places that I go to. I don't go to kind of the traditional film festivals. I try to go to the smaller places. I try to go to the ones that nurture young emerging talent. And also there are some great programs. They are mostly located in Los Angeles for crew, for training high school students in crew positions. So there are some good things happening there.
I mean, I can talk for the school. Most of our students, I would say, are kind of between like 21 and 26. But our intention is very much to kind of go back further, because I think when some of those decisions are being made, right, and I think about my own experience in school, it wasn't great. But that was partly because the only route that I could see, or that was, being given to me, was you need to prepare for college or for further education. But I was definitely not on track to do that, in terms of discipline and grades and all that kind of stuff. So it felt a little hopeless at that time. I felt like I had all these ideas, but there was no outlet. So, we've been going now for 2.5 years. We have 4 programs running, all online, but kind of based in 4 different locations around the country. We're starting in the UK next year. But I think beyond that, the long-term goal is, like you said, how do we go further back? How do we make sure that, when you're 15, 16, that you are aware that there are multiple ways into a career, right? There is a more traditional academic route, and that's great. But there are also routes that don't require that are maybe more suited to you if you are someone who is a more creative learner, or who needs to learn just in a different way. And I think that's very much in our kind of like long-term plan, because what I don't want to happen is that, and what we do see sometimes is that students come to us having done 2 or 3 years of college in a field that they were only in because their parents told them to do it, and coming from sometimes like strict, Black households where it's like, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be an engineer, you're going to be a lawyer, you're going to get a real job. And the creative industries are often seen as like, not that. We get a lot of students who have done that and have felt creative at their core the whole time, and they come to us and they find jobs through the program, and they kind of go back to their parents and say, this is what I really want to do, and now I'm in the job and I can kind of, I can prove that it's real. We want to make sure that, our program, or programs like ours, are on the table before they have to go through that experience, right? So yeah, absolutely. I think we have to go further back. Like I said, I didn't know that this was a career until I was in my mid-20s. And I think if I had known when I was 15, my life could be, it's turned out all right, but it could have been very different, So yeah, I 100% agree.
I'm going to say a couple of things. I don't know what direction it'll go, but anyway, to your point, I feel like our generation, we're activists as students, and we kick butt, basically, to whomever. And I'm not trying to cite any kind of riots or anything, just so you know. But I personally had an issue with a professor in comm, and we fought. And when as we fought, meaning my father and so forth, we fought from board level all the way down to that professor, okay? And we won. But along the way, I found out that he was doing this and had been doing this for decades with Black students, but they didn't know how to fight or that they could fight. It just so happened he came across us. So I think he went on sabbatical. All right, that's one piece. Because of that experience, I hated BU for decades and said that repeatedly. Now I went with the cautionary tale when people would come to me and say, should I go to BU? I said, well, you're not going to get a positive answer from me, so you may want to try somebody else, because this is where I am, okay? My dear colleague here, Mark, who we are partners in crime, have been for a long time, coerced me to try to think differently, okay? So now I'm here, all right, which is major. I'm here, yeah, major. and we helped create this session, which which is great, Now, part of the idea of doing this is for our generation and the previous generations and whoever else is alive to be able to connect with the Black students who are here now. So we can share what we went through, how to navigate it, and how to come out fine. And at the same time, contribute to the general dialogue that's going on in the school. That is our purpose here. So I'm glad you spoke up, continue speaking up, and encourage others to do so. And we are here to back you up, so to speak. Okay, that's my speech. Now, my question, two pieces. One is mindset. It's one thing to bring Black people in and all of this. If they all have the same mindset, for me, that's a problem. Okay, so how do you encourage different mindsets to come into different industries? Number one. Two, how are you encouraging Black people to get into the international world, to connect the dot between what's here and what's there? I work with the UN system. The correspondents there they're all from all persuasions, obviously. But when you come to American journalists, you don't see African American international journalists. And that's a problem in terms of helping our country deal with policies and so forth and so on. So that is my question, and I'll sit down.
In terms of different mindsets, for me, again, personally, I've sort of figured out that that was the right way to operate. And so I try to actively encourage that with the people I work with, the people that work with me. And I try to cultivate that, right? I think what makes me better is being surrounded by people who are not like me at all, have different backgrounds, different perspectives, and all of that stuff. And so that keeps me engaged and interested. And so I try in my sphere to do that. And I think the world is more open to that now than ever, right? Like when I think about when I started my career, I felt like it was all about blending in and basically having people forget I was Black, right? Like that was, success was if they didn't first think about that I was Black. And then I quickly learned that was not sustainable and that was not healthy and all bad things. And I began to be more of who I am. And so I encourage everyone in my world at whatever point they are in their life to be that, to be whatever is best for them. And I feel like the working world is much more open to that than it's ever been. So from that different mindset point of view, the international thing, again, for myself personally, I didn't leave the country until I was 30 years old. And it was just not a thing, right? My parents didn't travel, and like my father's from St. Thomas, so we'd go back to the Virgin Islands once a year, but that was it. So I finally got to a point in my life, my curiosity allowed me and my income allowed me to go explore. And so again, I think exposing people to that possibility and the ways to do it in a way that works for them from a financial point of view is also important. Yeah.
I agree, and I think that's an important piece of advice, is to advise students to travel, see the world, even when you finish school. And I am encouraged by the fact that some of the Emma Bowen fellows that I work with, a lot of them are doing study abroad. So it's something I hadn't even thought of, and it's like, why didn't I, do that? But I am encouraged by the fact that I am seeing a lot more students that are doing semesters abroad.
And I'll just go back to that point on intersectionality, that it is really important to bring broad perspectives of Blackness, broad perspectives of that experience and of humanness and all the things that we are. And class is an example where that is part of what bars us from being able to travel, and it is part of what bars us from being able to study. And certainly in the last 3 years that's been particularly true. So it's also figuring out how those of us who have access to those resources encourage that in folks who are not, who don't even know that's a possibility and then don't have the resources to actually do it.
I think something you said about the broad perspectives of Blackness is really resonates, because I think it's one of the mindsets that we kind of push against in the school is that for a long time, if you were a Black creative, you were given, the basketball brief, or
Right.
the type of work that you were allowed to work on and that you were given was based on these assumptions that because you were a Black creative, you must have experience or you must like this kind of stuff, and other kinds of work were not for you. And I think that's something that we really push against in the school, is that we say that, our motto is to be creatively excellent and unapologetically Black, but we believe that the insights that come from the Black experience, the young Black experience now, can be applied to any industry, to any brief, and they're going to bring a fresh perspective on that industry that is going to be a big differentiator, because it's probably not been told before or not applied to that industry before. So we do encourage this kind of wide spectrum of Blackness. We want them to feel like they can tackle any brief, any challenge, but apply their own experience to it and have that be valid. So I think, the mindset is something that it's very real, and I think all we can do in our position is to provide, hopefully, some of that confidence that their own approach and their point of view and their mindset is valid and needed, in the industry.
Well, one more question. But, yeah. Two. Yes.
Hi, my name is Emily Caulfield. I'm going to sit down because I'm so nervous, but I want to ask this question. I don't want to be seen. So I'm a comm graduate, and I have worked as a graphic designer for a few years. Right now, I'm trying to be self-employed. We're going to see how this works out. But my question kind of goes off of what you were saying earlier about having like that healthy sense of entitlement. That's something that I feel like I never had. I feel like I've always had a little bit of imposter syndrome, no matter where I've been. At BU, in all of my jobs, and I feel like it got particularly difficult after the murder of George Floyd, because I felt like my employer, which was primarily a white organization, and well-meaning white people who I worked with, wanted to lift me up and also present themselves in the organization as, being on the right side of things, which is great. So I'm very conflicted over this, and I would love to hear what you think. But I definitely feel like I was given opportunities that I'm not sure I would have gotten had that not happened. So if I went into that workplace having imposter syndrome, I feel like the murder of George Floyd and what came up after it, almost feeling as if you're being used as a pawn in some ways. If I had imposter syndrome before, I have imposter syndrome even more now, because I'm trying to navigate, what do I want? What do people want of me? How am I going to further my career while not being used for other people's optics or performative action? So that's not really a question, but maybe you can give me some advice on how to navigate through this.
I'm gonna say, sister, you are qualified. They were not hiring you and putting you in those positions before, and yes, we've all been tokenized and used in even more ways. But if that puts you in a position of power to be able to not do that to the next person, for you to know you are qualified. You should have had those roles in the first place.
Yeah.
It took something really horrible and tragic, and it constantly does, for us to finally be like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I do know what you all know. So I just want to make sure you are qualified.
Yeah,
And whether they are, using you, I'll just say quickly, we had a guest for Sister Brunch named Halis. She's a Black woman creator on YouTube, and she does not have all the views that she should. This woman is prolific. She puts out videos weekly, and they're high standards. They're great lighting, great sound, everything that makes for good video. And she can't hit that 100,000 mark that you need to hit for something on YouTube, right? And we had this conversation over it. She was like, but I don't want guilt and shame views or likes. And I'm like, take the guilt and shame views and likes, because it puts you in a position of power so that you make sure you're not the next person in that position. That's where I stand on it.
One thing I would add is to try to shut out the noise and listen to your voice, because that's where I believe your power comes from. Listen to your voice, follow your passion, follow what makes you happy, and that will lead to success, and shut all of that other mess out. And I would second what Fanshen said, is like, take the pity and make it work for you, right?
And for others, because you'll take it and make it work for others.
I've been in that very position, right? And one thing that I kind of maybe helped me come to terms with it was like, there are plenty of people who've gotten jobs for the sole fact that they were just a white man, right? Like, and if now, for the first time, being Black opens up a few more doors, I'm like, I know it is important to be there because you want to be there because you deserve it, right? But I think the whole industry has benefited from white people being given opportunities just for the pure fact that they've been white and at the right time in the right place, So I don't think it's something to dwell on too much. But like Fanshen's saying, it's like, if you're put in that position, you just make the most of the opportunity, right? And you use that chance to then open a door for someone else who you can kind of bring in on their merits and kind of bring them along and help ease that kind of sense that you might have felt, right? And now that you being in those positions, they can look up and say, well, there's someone there, there's someone I can follow.
And I'll just say too quickly, graphic designers are hot in Hollywood right now because we have to create pitch decks to pitch projects, and we do not have enough Black women, women of color, gender expansive people, and so we're constantly looking. So I will grab your card after too.
So thank you for letting us run a little over. Please join me in thanking the panelists.
Thank you, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be here.
All right,
with you.
on to the next thing.